we're back. And I don't know what we're back to, except for I'm back here with Ross again for what's going to probably be the third or fourth week in a row you've seen him now. Thanks for joining me again today, Ross.
Thank you very much for having me.
Starting to think you almost fit here.
It's interesting getting to come up here on Fridays, but it's very good and it's very important that we can talk to the community and make sure they get a good opportunity to know all the different things that myself and obviously our government have been working on.
And again, going back to all those questions that we were able to put out when we said we were going to have a town hall with you, and we had to break it down into three separate things because, frankly, one of the things is, what has Ross done for the community? He hasn't been here. You don't see him. He's only there for, what was the word I got? Photo opportunities. Kind of like, Bush playing today. But those photo opportunities usually come with funding announcements. They don't just kind of stand there. Remember and stand a few other things, but don't generally just stand there for the fact of, hi, I'm here to smile. So we're going to look back into some of what Ross has been able to secure for the community, and with the help of Ross's team and some of our own research, we have looked at some numbers here. Let's start with the steel plant, because back when you came out of city politics and into provincial politics, it wasn't necessarily in great shape.
Well, no, Dan, and in fact, one of the number one priorities for me was when I decided to run for provincial politics and municipal politics, even prior to that, was the out-migration of our youth. That was one of the biggest issues that scared me. Having three little boys of my own, it was very concerning, and the steel plant was a very significant part of that, given that I remember being in grade 9 when Algoma Steel in 1993 was going through its first restructuring and ended up going through 3 of those over a period of 30 years. And everyone knows how important Algoma Steel is to our community. It's such a substantial employer, largest employer in Sault Ste. Marie and in Northern Ontario.
When I wandered down to Jamestown, and they tell you used to be able to walk out of high school and walk into Algoma Steel. It didn't matter what your education was. It didn't matter what your background was, who you knew, or anything else. If you needed a job, you could walk out of high school, not even with a diploma in cases, walk into Algoma Steel and work 35 years with a pension.
Yeah. Well, I think what's really critical to think about when it comes to Algoma Steel, back in 2015 when I was on City Council, as everybody would remember, the then SR Steel Algoma filed for creditor protection under everybody referred to it as CCAA, the Creditor Companies Arrangements Act. And that process went on for 3 years. When I first got elected into the provincial government in 2018, not the by-election, but the second election, right, where our government was actually formed under Premier Ford, it was a matter of several months of very, very, very hard work and long days. I was then the parliamentary assistant to Minister Rickford and at Northern Development and Mines, and Northern Development and Mines was the ministry that was responsible for ultimately resolving the matter with Algoma Steel. And how we ended up getting that resolved, there were 3 critical pieces. There was an environmental piece, which was very, very important to get certain legacy arrangements arrived at and resolved. There were 2 other pieces that were related to specific numbers, and people will often say, well, what was the numbers or the financial element of that? There was a $60 million financing arrangement which allowed Algoma Steel to get certain capital expenditures done, which was a necessity in getting through the CCAA process. So there was the $60 million was a tremendous financial investment into Algoma Steel, but there was something that, from my perspective, the biggest part, the hardest part, was the pension relief. And what a lot of people may not appreciate was we had 8,000 retired steelworkers who are collecting a pension from Algoma Steel. They need that pension, right? They've invested in that pension. And that pension was very much at risk. Not very much at risk, it was at risk. And we had to find a way to get the public pension fund, which is guaranteed under the province. We had to get into that public guaranteed fund, and it needed to be topped up. And there was a real struggle to get that done, but we were able to get that guaranteed pension fund relief for 8,000 retired steel workers. And quite frankly, I think that was the biggest piece to getting the deal done, which ultimately allowed Algoma to emerge out of the CCAA process and allowed it to be healthy. So I think the first most important thing we did was we protected the pensions of over 8,000 retired steelworkers, and in doing so we also protected the jobs of 2,900 steelworkers actively with the $60 million investment.
And we're talking about manufacturing in the city, and since I've been here, Tenaris has been on a bit of a roll.
Right.
Bad pun
Indeed.
and everything else there. But they've been on a bit of a roll, and there's been some investments, both federal and provincial, in that type of, again, manufacturing in our city. The city is, and I come from a bunch of them, one-horse town, manufacturing and steel. Well, there's not a whole lot outside of that. There's a bit of railroad, there's a bit of stuff to that. But really, if you think Sault Ste. Marie, you think big steel plant, little steel roller beside it. But it's not so little anymore.
Well, Algoma Steel was once, it had within it Tenaris Algoma Tubes, and it was the tube mill once upon a time, and that obviously changed some time ago, and now we have Tenaris Algoma Tubes, which is also a tremendous employer in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, another great place, and that's also another piece that I'm very, very proud of. One of the interesting parts about being an elected official and the work that you do on so many projects, you put in a lot of work that it takes a lot of time before you get to the conclusion. So again, I was the PA to Minister Rickford at the time, and working on that file with Mr. McCaddy, I remember in the early days, Dave McCaddy at Tenaris Algoma Tubes, and that ultimately resulted in an announcement I only made, I guess it was a little bit over a year ago now, where we invested $9 million of provincial dollars at Tenaris Algoma Tubes. That $9 million leveraged a $117 million investment into Tenaris, and that resulted in 153 jobs. And that project is still is underway right now. I was actually just there. It would have been approximately 3 months ago. I was there with Minister of Finance Peter Bethlen-Falvey, and we were looking at the progress. And the first phase is now complete, and many of the new people have started working there in the new phase. The first phase was to upgrade the premium threading department or division at Tenaris Algoma Tubes. The second piece is really, really exciting, because that secondary piece, which was there was a $4 million and then a $5 million amount between phase one and phase two, and they were introduced together. They were announced together as a $9 million project. But that $9 million that leveraged a $117 million investment, that was to move Calgary's base operations into Sault Ste. Marie. So Sault Ste. Marie is now the hub for Tenaris's operations in Canada.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember something, again, going back about a year now, I do, right at the very beginning of my time here, I do remember something to that effect. One of the things the steel industry definitely needs, and is a fairly solid transportation network.
Right. Absolutely.
HCRY has been in trouble since probably long before I got here.
Yeah,
and I want to say in trouble. I know there's been some sales and some talks since then, but there was an investment made, approximately $1 million or so, I believe, if I remember correctly when I did some review here, that was made to keep them running, or how did that go?
So in our first year, again, while I was the PA, again at MNDM, the funding that we were able to secure then was $980 some odd thousand, just shy of $1 million. And that funding went to continue the operations of that railroad as we work towards a more finalized plan. And again, that work is still underway, and there will be more announcements to come, but HCRY here on Central Rail continues to chug along, and it's such a vital piece of infrastructure for all of Northern Ontario.
It's bringing more than just coal. It's bringing more than just some of the other things. It's bringing trees to the manufacturing here at Ecom.
Yep.
There's a lot of different things that come out of there. Right?
Domtar in Espanola.
Right.
So critical for Northern Ontario operations, but to put that into perspective, 80% of the freight on HCRY is entirely from Algoma Steel. So Algoma Steel would very much continue to need a solid, reliable infrastructure.
Whether it be their raw product in or their manufactured product out, it needs to be.
Because by boat we can only do things through certain points of the year. So the train is a very integral part to ensuring also from an environmental perspective that we're keeping as many trucks off the road as possible.
Where's the province there? I know we didn't cover this at all, but where does the province stand on getting some passenger rail back up into our area?
That is a continuous piece of work that we are always doing. Minister Fideli always and I are talking about this. The Ontario Northlander is a part as well of Minister Rickford's ministry at Northern Development and Mines, and that is something that is still being worked on to this day, and I hope that we're going to be able to do more in that regard in the future. At this point in time, I think the way I would maybe characterize some of these types of investments, like when we talk about Algoma Steel, way back at the $60 million investment of 2018, when we talk about the $1 million that went into the Huron Central Railway, I think those could be described as protecting the house, perhaps you could say, protecting the jobs we had, protecting the industry we had. But then you also have to look at ways to aggressively go out and do more. And I think that's been something that's been very important.
I think that passenger rail is one of those go out and do more things, because as you get more people here, tourism, we're trying to build and if you talk to City Hall on any given day, they're trying to build a budding tourism industry. It's all about the plaza, it's all about things like that. But without getting those tourists here, other than the 7-hour drive that it takes to go from the GTA to here, that's a fun little trip more often than not, especially this time of year. We want to do winter stuff, we want to have Bonsu and stuff, but a train would be nice.
It would be, and when I look at some of the elements of tourism, and that's like a very good point as well, we were able to fund a $5 million investment through the Agawa Canyon Tour Train, and that was to create the new hub and destination point, if you will, as well at the paper mill district and the just next to the machine shop, and now we have this beautiful center there. It's incredible. It was something that I'm a little saddened now with just recently learning of the passing that just happened earlier in the week of John LaFord. In fact, when we made that $5 million announcement, that building, that was about 3 years ago now that we announced the $5 million. The work that was done there is just incredible. You have now the spot where the tour train departs from. And I was there announcing the grand opening of that facility with Minister Rickford several months ago with John LaFord. And John has a beautiful painting in there that it's sad to see. In talking with
Tony after John passed, he reached out to us, and I didn't know anything about John. I hadn't met him next to seeing these beautiful paintings, but he's always said in that building there's going to be a piece of John for however long that building lasts. Because he decorated, he helped with the concepts and everything else inside of there. So there's a piece of John in that train station, and I think that's a fairly important piece of legacy.
My wife called me that very morning, right after learning of his passing, and she said, "You'll never believe it. I had bought a piece for my office here at the courthouse at Sault Ste. Marie, and she had bought this piece, and she said, I just picked it up and I just hung it on the wall, and I'm still begging her to bring it home because I'd like to be able to hang it at the house." But
it might be one of those fights you're better to leave alone.
she told me, she said, maybe we'll just buy another piece for the house. So
why not?
That's probably how we'll go.
Tourism announcements, since we moved along to that right now, you just walked out of one today down at the Bush Plain.
Very special one too, actually. Sometimes the dollar amount is what attracts all the attention. This was not a tremendous dollar amount. It was $75,000 to the Canadian Bush Plain Heritage Centre and another $50,000, well, technically $74,900 and $49,900 to Atomica. This is something very special to me. I bring my boys to Bush Plain Days all the time. We spent a lot of time at the Bush Plain Centre. In fact, my wife and I got married at the Bush Plain Museum, and I was joking with everybody there today as we made that announcement how my wife and I, when we maybe do our renewal of our vows, or we'll have another wedding if we can, we'll just do a second one there. Hopefully, of course we
actually, it's funny you say that. There was a wedding there when they had the Comic-Con came in. The two people that run the Comic-Con were married in the same, down there.
It would be nice to get to enjoy the Atomica insectarium there, because that's a pretty cool feature as well that we have. And it's important to remember, like, we're approaching 100 years of that Bush Plain Museum in Sault Ste. Marie, because the Ontario Provincial Air Service started at the Bush Plain site in 1924. So we're about to see the 100-year anniversary of that place, and that's a true and amazing piece of history for Sault Ste. Marie.
And when you look at our waterfront and you look at staples on the waterfront, you have Algoma Steel, you have the Bush Plain. Everything else in between has changed.
Indeed, and there's been so many other pieces, and you really want to protect what you have again. And we have such a beautiful set of pieces of history. The Old Stone House.
I was just sort of thinking to myself, like, there's one other one down there.
Yes, the Old Stone House. I remember under the Rural Economic Development Fund, the RED program, we funded just in excess of $300,000, I think it was, for brick restoration and some window restoration work on the building, which was in serious need of help. And how many times have people been to events at the Old Stone House? I know, again, my kids love going there. My wife likes to bring the boys.
I can honestly, I've never been there yet. And
you have to go. You have to go, and now I really, really hope you do. Well, I'm going to ask you about that next time I see you.
Of course you are.
It's gorgeous, and anybody who's grown
me
up
accountable. Whose job is this?
Anybody who's ever grown up in Sault Ste. Marie would have gone there almost every single year as part of one of your class trips.
I was going to say, was it
right?
A school trip? Kind of
school trips. It's such
kind of like learning how to curl up here as a school trip.
That's
we joked about that this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, learning.
But definitely a fan favorite in our household, and my kids love going there. Just love going into the building and looking around, and they have some amazing events in the summertime. Canada Day celebrations. I remember a few years ago being there for Lobster Festival there on Canada Day. We just recently they just had the Blueberry Fest there. It's a great place. It's really cool, and it's something nice to bring your kids to, or just go visit for the day, right?
Learning how to curl kind of learns into learning how to play hockey, and hockey kind of leads to this. So there was a $31 million conversation being had in Sault Ste. Marie, and it was how we were going to fund a replacement for the McMeekin Arena. And I will say, from a journalist point of view, well played the way you put that announcement out that day. But now, jokingly, the hush tones around, like, we should call it the Ross Romano Memorial Arena. Let's hopefully it's not Memorial anytime soon, but 18 million or so.
Yeah, that was a pretty incredible announcement, and you really have to thank Mayor and Council for allowing myself and then Minister Scott to be able to make that announcement at a City Council meeting. That was certainly special.
And there was no word of it to anybody, like no heads up to anybody, not the councillors, anybody else. Whoever kept that one a secret did really, really well.
It was a tough one to pull off, and it went right down to the wire. There's so many processes in government, and even if you know something is coming, it's not official until you get through Treasury Board. And so if I remember correctly, the Treasury Board meeting was just a matter of the day before, or the Friday before. And I was really pressed for that one. And I remember speaking with Mayor Provenzano in advance of that. And neither one of us knew for sure if it was going to work. I felt very, very confident that we were going to be able to pull that off. But it got to a point where he had to hold off right until the 11th hour and said, well, we have it on the agenda because we have to tender out the project. And so we have to go ahead with our agenda.
Even the
and if you come through,
even your money wasn't on the agenda that day.
It couldn't have been. It couldn't have been. In fact, it might have even been earlier in the day on that Monday of the council meeting that we got the approval, which it was kind of like, if you don't have your approval by 4:30 p.m., he had said, we're going to have to go ahead and determine whether we decide to tender the project.
Yep.
And so it was structured on purpose, so that we could be in a position to make that announcement. And that's why I say we work better when we work together. That was a classic example of like a very, very strong working together. And we were able to get $18 million, and that allowed for a $33 million expenditure. And if you look at that now, you've got cranes, you've got construction. And
there wasn't going to be a track, I shouldn't say there wasn't going to be a track. When we sat there 2 weeks before the announcement, and we were even 4 weeks before, when they put it back out to tender, the track was very much a question mark because it was a $2 million expenditure for the city that some councillors were looking at and deciding they may not want. But when the government came through with 18 million, they went, well, okay, we're not looking at 31 all on our own. We're looking at 14, so why don't we make it the other 3.5 and make it everything they wanted it to be. Indeed. Versus everything that it could be. So we look at that type of investment into, and that's probably one of the bigger investments outside of the steel industry made into Sault Ste. Marie.
That was certainly one of them, and that one was right around the same time that we did a large investment at Algoma University as well into a similar piece of infrastructure. But I'll get into that in a minute. Just to finish with the piece at the McMeekin, updating the McMeekin was critical. That was another one. I was on city council when there was a CO2 leak there, right? That was substantial. And I played hockey there, and I played soccer there
I think a lot
at the
of
indoor
people
soccer
probably
field.
over the 50 years of the building can say they played hockey there. It's a hub,
well, and
especially that part of the year.
And where the two indoor soccer turfs are indoor. I've played soccer there since that place was opened. I now coach my kids there. Well, actually, up until 2 weeks ago, since COVID had us shut down the league. But I coach all of two of my boys on Saturdays there for about 4 hours, and it's such a great spot. It's a community center. So now to be able to have the soccer complex, to be able to have the hockey arenas, to be able to have the walking track. I mean, we have an aging demographic in this community, and I know so many people who live right around that area who are currently out there walking around the soccer field. And to be able to have a proper walking track there for seniors and for everyone else to use, it's an awesome, awesome place, and such a special thing for our community to have a community center like that. And it's also really important, growing up in the West End all my life and living in the West End, there's not a lot of those types of things in the West End, right, of the city. You have the John Rhodes, you have the Queenie, you've got Strathclair, in the east. But in the West End, it's really nice to be able to have a facility like that, and to have that construction happening right now in the West End of the city. That's huge. That's a real positive thing. And now in the East End, we also have the Algoma University Cultural Center, which we announced also just before the hockey arena was announced. And that was another tremendous investment. That was through the OSIP program with the federal government, and our share of that money was a little north of $7 million the provincial government put in. But the provincial government nominated those projects on, and Algoma University is now building Mukwa-Wakaigan. And Mukwa-Wakaigan is a really special project that I'm extremely proud of, because that connects to what we spoke of last week in terms of mental health and addictions, right? That's such a critical
tying
piece.
all of those things together.
Well,
absolutely.
and you talk about John LaFord, right? About John LaFord. Algoma University Shingwak Hall is the only residential school you can walk into in this entire province. There's one in Brantford, it's boarded up. There's others as well that you can't get into. But to think that at Shingwak Hall, you can walk in.
And you can touch the same walls they did.
And you can touch the same walls, and now the history that exists. We have tens of millions of dollars of archives there. And it's also a tourist attraction, because people will come on cruise ships into our community, and I hear it from the hoteliers. People that come into our community, one of the first things they ask is, we want a piece of Indigenous history. We want to know more of Indigenous history. What better place to do than at a residential school?
You have the residential
archives.
School, and now you have the building across the street from it too.
Right.
And that does that.
SKG.
In order to get to those buildings, and this is a really bad.
We also
segment.
funded $2 million towards that building.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say the SKG building,
yeah.
and there was something there for funding of both federal and provincial with you guys.
Yeah.
The roads in the city have been an issue, and I go bumpity bump on them probably more than most people, because I follow everybody else around the city.
Certainly.
There's been some significant
huge
funding
huge
into those. Like when we're pointing out all these funding things, and it really comes down to what has Ross done, and we're going to be able to, as we go forward and into what's going to be an upcoming election, you're going to see the other candidates on the desk here doing the same thing with me. So don't just, before anybody gets out there, we're answering questions from the community that have, what has Ross done? So we're going through what Ross has done. So,
well, the biggest,
roads and buses.
The big was, well, transit. I think, if memory serves me correctly, it was just over $4.5 million. We announced that through the OSIP program. That was something that was announced about 2.5 years ago. That was a big announcement, but again, it has been a 3.5 year period now since I first got elected. And now that was substantial.
On that OSIP and on that transit thing, now the city has joined with other cities to start purchasing buses through the OSIP as a bigger core to get save a little more money. So in the end, there's positive for how we're spending this money too, right? So
yeah, but that $4.5 million was a tremendous amount, and certainly I know something that was very, very special for the city as well, because obviously transit users who are on those roads certainly need reliable, safe, and affordable means of transportation. But roads is.
I want to say $3 million to turn Black Road into a raceway.
You know the Black Road. That was one that, as a city councillor, we fought for so long with then Minister of Transportation Stephen Del Duca. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics behind this. Now the leader of the Liberal Party, though. But I remember as a city council, we're penning letters to then Minister of Transportation Stephen Del Duca for funding. I can recall numerous occasions where we were you wanted to hit your head against the wall of City Hall when you were walking out of the building saying, why won't the province fund Black Road? It's a connecting link that runs right through our city, and it's a tremendous hazard. And I remember in the election, that first election, I was knocking on doors and walking down Black Road and transports whizzing by me and thinking, this is dangerous. Like, this is so dangerous. We need this thing to be 4 lanes.
It's gotten a whole lot better, but everybody goes faster. I had to turn into a place there a few months ago, and I'm like,
well, the $3 million though is the max, and just to be clear on that one, there is only $30 million for the entire province's Connecting Links Fund, and we got the max not 1 year but 2 years in a row.
Because Trunk come across too,
and then we did Trunk Road as well, and Trunk Road they were able to do the entire resurfacing project with that. So we were able to take care of.
Blame him for all the traffic mishaps then.
So construction does generally lead to delays in traffic, but it's a good thing. And we have construction in the East End, we have construction in the West End, and before that construction started, we repaved all those roads on Trunk Road. We made Black Road safer and 4 lanes, and it really ought to have been done earlier, but it's done, and that's all that matters. But that was $6 million of the province's money, and that was great work that I really have to thank Minister Caroline Mulrooney for. And I lobbied Minister Mulrooney quite a bit, and we worked very hard together, and in fact had to work very hard with her on numerous projects that were of importance in her role as Minister of Francophone Affairs, like building the first ever Francophone University. But that's another story.
I think something we're going to tack back to from last week. I've been able to talk to Lisa Caston sitting down with you, and get her input onto stuff that the province has done to help with health care, whether it be long-term care health, but in her case it was mental health and addictions. And she had nothing but praise for both levels of government, be it municipal or provincial, for all the help they have been to securing funding and stuff towards addictions and mental health. I know we talked about this at length last week, but there were some significant investments made into both addictions and mental health and homelessness, as well as long-term care. And I'm going to let you exfoliate, don't like to exfoliate, but expand. It's a Friday. Expand. Give me a break.
I've got that. I understand. Well, I mean, healthcare in particular, under healthcare in particular, you've got the 1.6, in excess of 1.6 million we talked about last week. And that does not talk about the actual capital money. I have not made that announcement yet, but it is coming, everyone. The operational funding, though, is $1.6 million just on mental health and addictions. We discussed that last week, so I won't get into that any further. But again, operational funding, we're talking year over year over year. That didn't exist before. I want to say as well, in terms of the money at the hospital itself, we were able to increase the surge capacity at our hospital by the total of $2.4 million a year of operational money. That's 26 beds.
Surge capacity a little more. So is that like when they get full, they can open up some more? Is that
generally speaking, yes. It's extra bed capacity for like flu season, or all of a sudden something like COVID hits, right? So that surge capacity was very, very substantial. That was $2.4 million, and that was 26 extra beds that were funded through Sault Area Hospital, or through the government to Sault Area Hospital. So when you combine the 2.6 plus the 1.4, you got $4 million of extra operational money in 1 year just in the area of health. Now, to put that into perspective, in the 8 years before 2017, you want to look at it then and then now, or the difference between the former government and the current government, there was an 8-year freeze in hospitals on funding previous to 2018. 8 years without a single increase, 0% across the board, And now we're looking at a $4 million a year. Again, that's year over year over year, and that continues on in extra operational funding. And
now,
that's just at the hospital alone.
Was that hospitals, when you say 0% freeze, that was hospitals, if I recall from being in Windsor, that was hospitals across the province that were required to do 0%, not just
the entire,
right?
hospitals across the province
Yeah.
were frozen at 0%. I can't speak to what every other hospital in the province received,
no,
but I can tell you we saw an increase
but
of
I was recalling
million.
back to when I was doing this job in Windsor, and I believe that was the 0%, and it was always hard on the funding down at Windsor Area Hospital too.
And in fairness, when I say the $4 million total, it's not all just at Sault Area Hospital, because as we discussed last week, some of that $1.6 million of operational money went through Algoma Family Services or Sault College or Algoma University or the school boards. So it was spent in different ways.
So our time is starting to run a little short here. So we're looking at some long-term care beds, and I'm just going to go over the one that 370. I had 250 when I did my math, and thanks to your crew over there, that 370 is what popped up. What surprised me was the 128 at SAH, because I didn't think there were long-term care beds in SAH. I know people that are waiting for long-term care are in SAH, like they are in every other hospital in Ontario.
Well, they've been funded. And that's something that I'm very interested to see where the progress is at. And I think that's the next step we have to talk about. But we have. I know when I was elected in 2018 into the government of Ontario, we were looking at Sault Ste. Marie had a waiting list of about 700. Give or take 700 to 750 people on a waiting list to get into long-term care. We have now put the funding and the capacity into getting, I think the numbers might have been a little bit off. I think it's actually a total of 342 beds. I know that we had through OFRA, the Finnish Rest Home, we were able to get a total of 68 beds. There was another 50 beds at Cedarwood. 128 beds through the hospital.
If I recall from last night, that 750 that we're waiting is down to about 400 because the city in DSAB is headed to the province for the community paramedicine funding. And that's to help 400 long-term care, or 400 individuals who are waiting for long-term care in the community access some of these tests and everything else at home, so they don't get to come to SAH. So that 758's come down 300, well, probably close to 370 beds.
Right.
So
there's more work to do. I want to be crystal clear on this. There's still more work to be done, and I intend to be spending a little bit more time looking at when is the construction going to begin? Where is that? Because those announcements were made throughout the course of the last several years. In fact, the most recent one I made was in Batchewana of 96 beds. But I could tell you we've got a total of 342 spots that we didn't have in 2018 today, right? We've got 342 net new spots that we didn't have in 2018, and we need more. And I'm not going to stop at 342 because the number I had to target was 700, and I intend to get as close to 700 if not hit it. But that's a delay across. I mean, that's an issue. There's 28,000 beds.
Long-term care is not just an issue here. And talking to all my friends all over, not even just Ontario, but just nationwide, and talking to people in this industry, you find out long-term care is a problem. Same as healthcare, mental health and addictions. All those are problems that don't just happen in Sault Ste. Marie. They happen in Toronto. They happen in Thunder Bay. They happen in Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, coast to coast. Long-term care, mental health and addictions, transportation, roads, capital investment, all that stuff is not just a Sault Ste. Marie issue, but this is a Sault Ste. Marie representative, so here we are.
Well, one other one I think that's really important to note when you think of those, and you mentioned a really good point. So OMPF funding is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. And under the OMPF, our funding in Sault Ste. Marie, when I was a city councillor and got elected into government in 2018, we were receiving just over $15 million a year. Now we're receiving $1.5 million more a year. Again, that's operational money. That's over and above anything we have. And if you look at the municipal budgets, $1.5 million is 1.5% on your tax rate, right? So that's a substantial increase, a very, very substantial increase of over $1.5 million a year. I think today, if I remember correctly, we are now at $16,822,000 a year that the city of Sault Ste. Marie receives. And that's that funding, OMPF funding, is specifically based on a community's tax base. So the lower your tax base, the more you would receive. But communities out there like Sudbury aren't receiving that kind of funding. right?
Well, because they have a bigger tax base, but that's a whole different conversation.
But certainly, I know people complain about our tax rates in Sault Ste. Marie all the time.
Right.
I know I heard it, and when I was a city councilor, I always wanted to. I would say all the time,
You-
you've got to stay at the rate of inflation. That's fine, but you can't increase taxes over the rate of inflation.
You say that now as we're looking at a budget document that I haven't had a chance to glance at, but that's popping up in front of us Monday, or well, it may be past when you see this now, but just recently here we've talked about another budget. Before you did your parallel slide from the Minister of Universities over to where you're at now, there were some things you were able to accomplish for Algoma University and Sault College.
There's been a lot there, and I'm very, very proud of that period of time. What we got done was pretty impressive. I think the changes that were made in terms of operational funding amounts was so significant. I mean, there was, and also the fact that we were dealing with COVID throughout that period. I mean, in the first short period of COVID, right away, as soon as COVID hit, I knew the universities and the colleges would be struggling, and I knew ours was struggling tremendously. It was really challenging. So we got right out of the gates, and I put a $25 million fund out the door immediately within the first 30 days of COVID. And the funding that we received, our share at Algoma University and Sault College, and again, we got 45 colleges and universities in the province of Ontario. And Sault College and Algoma University are amongst the very, very smallest of them all, right? Yeah. 500,000 plus went to each of those institutions. In fact, if I remember correctly, I've got to look at my sheet here because there was a lot of numbers here I was trying to remember, but Sault College received $556,203 in that first tranche of funding. So if you put that into perspective, $556,000 out of $25 million, and Algoma University received $492,068 out of $25 million. So if you do that math, that's, you know, and then you go percentage-wise, like just put this into perspective here. A school like U of T has 98,000 students, and Algoma University's down at around a couple thousand students. A college like Humber has over 30,000 students, and Sault College is around 2,500 students. Yeah. So very, very, very substantial differences. Yeah. But now you look at the financing, and I said, you know, we need to give more money to the smaller institutions, not the larger institutions, because the larger institutions have a bigger base to collect from. Right. So we made sure that in that first 30 days, we got that $25 million out the door, and those were immediate COVID supports of about $500,000 apiece for our two local institutions. But it didn't stop there, because by the end, funded a tremendous amount of COVID supports. Now again, these were one-time expenditures. Right. This wasn't operational money.
No, this is just to get them through.
And we were able to do, for Sault College, and this was based, I created a formula that was premised on the overall health of the institution. So Sault College ended up getting $1.5 million.
And that formula was then applied to colleges across the province.
The entire province. And so some institutions, both colleges and universities, got nothing.
Right, because
in fact,
they were extremely healthy.
Exactly. Half of the institutions got nothing.
Right.
Half of the institutions got the rest of it.
Right.
And that fund was a tremendous fund. The total was in excess of $100 million. And I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head.
Are those required to be paid back to the province, or were those just supports right off the bat? Those were just straight up,
yes,
right?
That was just, again, COVID relief support. So
because I know there were some loans in there, not necessarily for the schools and stuff, but there were some things that the province did that were like they were loans to get back eventually in the end. But
not those particular ones, but the last round of COVID supports, like I said, Sault College got $1.5 million,
right, and
Algoma University got $4.8 million. So that was in COVID supports alone. The college got about $2 million, and Algoma ended up getting in excess of $5.2 million, $5.3 million. And those were those COVID supports, again, one-time only expenditures. Right. We also had, I mean, when you talk about COVID supports, though, and this is not in relation to the university or the college, but we were able to provide, I think it was $8.2 million in funding across the some 300 businesses in the Sault area, and there was another in terms of NORP, the Northern Ontario rebate program. We were able to do, under the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, we
Right.
had a certain funding as well, which funded, sorry, did I say 300 businesses? My apologies, it was 109.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
109
think there was
businesses got,
100 and, I had 120 or something, but yeah.
109 businesses actually was for 8.2 million. My apologies, a lot of numbers running through my head here. But
I'm 1,000 stories into the Sioux, and I don't remember half the numbers I run either sometimes, so it's okay, I get it.
there was a couple other really special moments here, and I think probably when we talk about funding that is both operational and then there's your capital. So
Right.
some operational dollars that were special that I'm excited about, again, something very, very passionate about. So there was something called the Facilities Renewal Program. And the Facilities Renewal Program was something that was used for colleges and universities to receive operational funding, and it's principally geared towards deferred maintenance. But if they want to do anything new, any kind of new building, they would use that fund.
Or like a scoreboard replacement, or pick one. They could use that fund for stuff like that,
Various
right?
different
Anything
things,
fixing or
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So
HVAC.
typically our institutions in the north, and a smaller institution would receive, at Algoma University and Sault College, it was in the neighborhood of about $260,000 a year, province-wide, right?
Yeah.
And so our institutions were getting, the smaller ones were getting the base, which was $259,900 as the smallest. The total of the fund was $71 million. I increased that to $144 million. Moving on, right?
Right.
This isn't just,
Right.
this wasn't just, again, one-time funding. This is operational. And when I increased the fund, I changed the formula for how that would work so that, again, smaller institutions that need more help, right? That need a lot more help can get more money, because the big institutions, you talk about a U of T or a Humber, they get a lot of investments
from their
through the private
students,
sector.
private
From the
sector.
private sector
Yeah.
as well, right? They get a lot more donations. They can fundraise a lot more. So for our institutions now, you'll recall I made an announcement where Algoma University and Sault College got over $10 million over a 3-year period.
Right.
So they're north of, I think at Algoma University, they're getting $1.5 million a year,
And
where
then-
they were receiving $259.
Yeah.
And Sault College is getting just shy of 2.15 million a year. Per year, again. This is money per year.
And to wrap it all up and just put a nice little bow on it, I say that I sat and I looked through some of these numbers, and I had about between 100 and 150 million dollars. Ross's people have come across with somewhere around 150. It could be upwards of 200 million dollars just invested into Sault Ste. Marie in the 3 years since you've taken over. If there's something that you want to bring to Sault Ste. Marie before your time is hopefully not up, but at least before your term is up, like in your case, hopefully not. There's other people that are going to want you to be up, and I can guarantee you I hear from them every day too. What would that be?
Well, there's so much more. There's so much more to do. It's not one. It's not one item. I've said this last week when we talked about mental health and addictions. I really want to drive towards getting us a medical school, and I think that there's a really interesting opportunity, a niche market when it comes to mental health and addictions, in the sense that there's no research happening in the sector exclusively at one center. And I thought that pushing hard for Mukawakaigan at Algoma University, because of the residential school being Xinhua Hall, because of the archives being located there, because it's also a gathering place here at Bawating, I thought that would be the most natural location for a medical school that was geared towards research and training for mental health and addictions. I would love to see a research institute at Algoma University. And everything, I often say it's about connecting the dots. We also funded $3 million through the NOHFC to Algoma University during this period while we were going through COVID. Algoma was struggling mightily when it came to virtual learning. Algoma is now a leader in virtual learning, province-wide. And when I say a leader, they are one of the only institutions in the entire province of Ontario that can now give you a full degree online. And again, connecting to so many of the remote communities, First Nation communities, that have such a struggle being able to get to a physical establishment in their backyard. To be able to get a degree online virtually in full is critical. And again, I remember that announcement. It was such a special announcement at Algoma University when we announced the $3 million, because at the start of COVID, things were really, really precarious, to put it mildly. at our university locally. And I think that's such a critical piece to being able to grow your community. You said earlier at the outset, not being a one-horse town, that is substantial. The other piece, I didn't mention, and again, there's going to be an announcement of capital coming forward at Sault College. I have more to talk about there because we were able to score a school of engineering. Imagine, here in Sault Ste. Marie, we now have an engineering school specializing in mechatronics, computer, electrical, and mechanical engineering all blended together. And think about when you're an advanced manufacturing community like we are, and all the work that's happening with an EAF at Algoma Steel, and you talk about the investments at Tenaris becoming a premium threading destination now, and all of the other work that we do, things like all the other advanced steel manufacturing we have here. We need engineers, and why wouldn't we
need a
want
lot
a
of
school
things,
of
and maybe that'll lead us back right to the very beginning point, which is trying to keep youth in Sault Ste. Marie.
Well, and that's
training
the
them
thing.
for the jobs that are here, and maybe training them for the jobs of the future that are coming.
I will conclude with this. I will say my priority when I ran to be the MPP for Sault Ste. Marie, when I asked everybody in this community to put some faith in me, to give me a chance, it was because I remember that 1993 year all too well. I remember being in high school. I remember Algoma Steel was on its knees. And I remember my dad, and I remember my grandpa and my uncles telling me about the struggles of Algoma Steel, and we were all very scared about what that meant. And as a kid going through high school, everybody started to leave this place right in and around the 90s. Everybody started to leave, and we had this major out-migration of our youth. So when I ran for this position, it was because I wanted to find a way to keep our kids here. And so for me, it's about creating job opportunities. It's about protecting the ones we have and creating new ones. Looking at research, training opportunities, growing our university, growing our college. I look at OLG. OLG does not need to be focused in Toronto. It needs to be in a community like ours, especially after what we've learned through COVID, and people can work through home in a way that they never had. I know we're going to be talking a lot more about, next week we're going to have a conversation about the work that I'm doing in my ministry. The work I do in my ministry now has a lot to do with our real estate, with our offices that we have across the province. And there is, from my perspective, and I brought Minister Bethlyn Falvey to the Soo, we went to OLG, we went to Algoma University, we toured a lot of these facilities, and I'm, at the end of the day, I think that we could do so much more. And we're going to continue to fight for that because I don't think we're done yet. No. There's been a substantial amount of investments. And as I stopped to come in and get ready for today and put a little bit of time into drawing up some notes about all the investments we've made, and it's in excess of $150 million over a 3-year period of time. But there's a lot more to come.
There's a lot more to come. And with that, thank you for joining me, Ross.
Thank you.
And we will be back with him in the next couple of weeks with some other stuff.